What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. In this video, we are going to be looking at a bunch of weapons you probably want to have in your arsenal for the day 1 raid. And even if they're not on your character, you want to at least have them leveled up to 1530 in your vault so you can call on them if needed. It goes without saying, but I am not going to be explaining what these weapons do, as if you are attempting a day 1 raid, then you probably know this already. I will just be listing the weapons and give a brief explanation of why you probably want these ready to go for day 1. And if you find this video helpful, then a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. And to all those who have been enjoying my content so far in Witch Queen, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to me. Now, onto the video. Let's start in the kinetic slot. One more thing I should mention is Vow of the Disciple is most likely going to be a Scorn raid, but we very well could run into Hive, so you may need a bow or scout for anti-barrier. But if you do not want to use one of these weapons, then may I suggest Arbalest. I've been pairing Arbalest with the Glaive and a rocket launcher in Master Wellsprings, as well as using it in Lost Sectors, and I am continually impressed with just how good it is now that it has the Catalyst. This weapon goes extremely hard, and even if there are no barriers to deal with, it is a great option to run just for dealing with shields. Got an Arc Chieftain but you only have a Void subclass and energy weapon and a heavy solar? Well, slap on Arby to take any shield out in one shot. It also outputs incredible damage. I use it on Scornwalker legs or the tanks in Vox Obscura and it totally slaps. I cannot recommend this weapon enough. Next is probably my favorite weapon in the game, and that is WITHERHOARDO. This thing is extremely versatile and wonderful for locking down areas and clearing adds while remaining safely behind cover. I am a sucker for autoloading weapons, so pairing this with an autoloading rocket and a good energy weapon is seriously my go-to, and it has been for quite a while now. Make sure you have this gun ready to go for day 1. Sticking with exotic special weapons, we have AGER'S Scepter. If you are running a stasis build, then this exotic will be that much more valuable. I recently used it in a 1580 Lost Sector, and I can say the damage buff to red bar enemies is extremely noticeable. This thing is great on ammo and very effective at locking down sections of a map. Next, we have one of the coolest weapons in the game and an extremely heavy hitter in IZANAGI'S Burden. If you know how to parlay it with an autoloading rocket, you will be a DPS dream. And with how tanky champions are when you are underleveled, this weapon could prove to be very valuable for taking them out in one stun. Sticking with the special weapons, I have two of my favorites. We will go with the older one first, and that is the Succession Sniper Rifle. If you have the Godroll Reconstruction Vorpal, then you're chillin'. If you don't have a good Succession, then the Stasis Sniper Rifle Thoughtless could be a decent alternative. Next, we have the ultimate utility weapon in a kinetic grenade launcher with blinding grenades. I prefer to use Pardonard Dust as it has autoloading holster, but Ignition Code can also roll blinding grenades, so it will get the job done just as well. I recently did a 1580 Master Lost Sector 16 light under power, and the utility the blinding grenades give is just unmatched. So valuable. That's it for kinetic specials. Now let's look at kinetic primaries, starting with an exotic, the OSTEO STRIGA. This weapon with the catalyst is extremely strong, and with exotic primaries doing 40% extra damage to red bars, this thing could be your best friend for ad clear. It also does a surprising amount of tick damage to higher tier enemies, so you can lay a clip into them and then damage them with a special or heavy. Next up, we have an oldie but a goodie, Outbreak Perfected. Now, I doubt we will use this, as primary DPS is kind of a thing of the past, but it was an early meta pick for the Cranosauro raid boss, so you may just want to have it ready to go just in case. After that, I have a Fatebringer on me for two reasons. One, Unstoppable Hand Cannon. But if we need to play at more of a distance, I also have some kinetic pulse rifles ready to go with Unstoppable Pulse. My hand cannon has Adrenaline Junkie and Osmosis, which allows me to get volatile flow going on it, so it is a wonderful option given my playstyle. I also have an Extraordinary Rendition ready to go if need be. We only have Overload SMG or Auto Rifle this season unfortunately, and they both rather suck. I will mostly be depending on my Void Grenades for overloading, but say you're running Well of Radiance or something so you don't have that utility, then the situation may ask for running an Auto Rifle or SMG, so you may need one ready to go. I also may switch to a Crate Auto Rifle as I have a nice roll and it affords me a bit more range, and if I really need more range, I will go with a 7 Seraph Carbine. That is really it for the kinetic slot. I obviously left some good options on the table, but I am trying to limit this to about 10 in each slot as you cannot carry more than that into the raid. So in saying that, next up we have the energy slot. And right off the bat, we have 7 energy weapons that are void. This is obvious because we can take advantage of volatile flow, which is one of the best mods this season. Let's start with the newest weapon archetype, and that is the Glaive. the Void Glaive specifically, the Enigma. The suppression effect that this thing gives is very similar to blinding grenades, and that's super valuable as it can buy you time and a reprieve from enemy damage. I use this extensively in Master Wellsprings. I will stun a knight, break its shield with Arbalest, and then go to Pound Town with the Glaive melee. The double special build works amazingly well as I never actually run into ammo issues. This is especially potent on a hunter who can go invisible off their Glaive kills. And with it likely being a scorn raid, Unstoppable Glaive is also very nice to have. Let's stick with legendary specials and go to the energy slot grenade launchers. Again, you want blinding grenades. Both Truth-Teller and Empty Vessel can roll auto-loading and blinding, so those would be the play here. For legendary primary weapons, I have similar weapons to the kinetic slot. I have a Palindrome for unstoppable hand cannon and to take advantage of volatile flow, but I also have a Crisis inverted with adaptive munitions. I did a breakdown on this weapon perk, and it can actually be very viable in endgame content. I used it on the new Metamorphosis Lost Sector, which had solar and arc shields. It was able to handle the solar shield pretty well. We then have the talk of the town in the FUNNELWEB, aka Recluse 2.0. RNG's blessed me with a Subsistence Adrenaline Junkie roll, which is my personal god roll. It can take advantage of Volatile Flow and Overload SMG, and being a Warlock main, it pairs amazingly with Verity's Brow. They go together like peanut butter and jelly. And again, if we need a little more range and an auto is the play, then Gnawing Hunger or Shadow Price would be good instead. And if for some reason I need a bow, then I am running Imperial Needle. This bow is dealing extra damage right now, and it is void, so it's just automatically better. If this gets nerfed, or rather fixed, then the seasonal bow under your skin is another amazing option. I actually love the feel of this bow, I just don't have a great roll on it yet. And speaking of bows, let's shift our gaze to the exotics and talk about Le Monarque. I recently used this in a Lost Sector, and holy hell it is amazing. I've always loved this bow, but that 40% damage increase to red bars is truly no joke. And once again, it can take advantage of volatile flow. But depending on the subclass you are running, then Trinity Ghoul or TICUU'S Divination are also extremely strong options. You can't go wrong with any of them. We'll now look at the last void energy weapon, and it is actually a jack of all trades, and that is the Dead Messenger. This can shoot any energy type and is amazing for both ad clear and shield break utility. Given how difficult the mission is to complete underleveled, I'm sure if you have this weapon, then it is already high enough level for the raid. Now let's move on to two very good arc weapons. I stated earlier I love high burst DPS weapons, and 4th Horseman is certainly that. It doesn't have great ammo reserves for how much it expends, but you may want it just in case. It was a great DPS option for Aatrax on day 1 before Lament became king, so if we have another short window damage phase, this weapon could be very good. Again, one of those options that is unlikely, but it will be nice to have if needed. I'm adding another weapon in here that I almost forgot about, and that is the exotic SMG Risk Runner. I used this on day 1 of Deepstone Crypt due to the extensive arc damage, so if there is another encounter with lots of arc damage, this gun is amazing for survivability. It was also a popular option for day 1 Garden of Salvation. It's seriously a great weapon in the right situations. And for the final energy weapon, we have Divinity. Not everyone needs one of these obviously, but someone in your raid team should have it ready to go. I noted in a previous video, but I will state it here again, the Void 3.0 debuffs actually override Div's debuff. This shouldn't happen as Void 3.0 is only 15% and Div is 30%, but it is what it is and it is happening. It is a thing, and unless Bungie fixes it, then do not have people debuffing the boss with Void if someone is running Divinity. Additionally, on bosses like Kali, Div actually causes you to do less damage than if you just hit her crit. So another thing to watch out for. But I still stand by having a Div ready. Overloads are a bitch this season with the crappy artifact mods of Overload SMG and Auto, so Div could prove very valuable for stunning Overload chieftains. And just like that, we are finished with the energy weapons. On to the heavy weapons. And more than any time that I can remember, we have a shit ton of amazing heavy weapons. Let's start with one of my favorite archetypes, and that is rocket launchers. WARDCLIFF Coil has been making the rounds for doing awesome damage to bosses again. Back in Spire the Stars, this thing slapped around Valka Ore, so depending on the boss, this could be a great option. This weapon really seems to chunk certain bosses. And speaking of weapons that can chunk bosses, DEATHBRINGER is all the rage recently. However, I am not sold, and here's why. Many DPS phases don't account for what DEATHBRINGER offers, and even if it does, it can still be wildly inconsistent. If the fire team members on your team know how to use this weapon, then that's awesome and you guys will totally shred through bosses. But if someone is new to how this weapon works, then in my opinion it's far better to have them run a Gjallarhorn which still does respectable damage, but gets that damage off far easier and far more consistently. Still, have Deathbringer leveled up and ready to go, as right now it's pretty much the highest DPS weapon in the game. On top of that, it is also a menace for ad clear. I would use it on Atheon just for taking out all the supplicants. It was amazing at it. So I don't want you to think that I think this weapon is bad, I just want to reiterate that those using it must know how to use it. I also touched on Gjallarhorn, and that one is kind of a no-brainer. It is good for ad clear, good at taking out shields, good for boss damage. It is a jack of all trades and can serve you well in a variety of activities. Honestly, I really slept on it before this season, but I've been using it a lot more lately and I'm very impressed with it. And it has the added bonus of buffing other fire team members' legendary rockets. Because of this, if you have a god roll legendary rocket, then run that while someone runs their galley. I run an autoloading cluster bomb royal entry a lot, and I know it doesn't do as much damage as explosive light, but you can throw on Font of Might and Volatile Flow, and all of a sudden it gets better anytime you pick up a Void Well. If you have a royal entry or the hothead with clown cartridge, then run those if your team opts for rocket DPS. Those are the best in the game for DPS. Specifically hothead due to a recent slight buff to the adaptive frame rocket launchers and a slight nerf to precision frames. But if you are making Void Wells before a damage phase, and you have Font of Might equipped, then Royal Entry would be the play. Hesiod Vengeance and Tomorrow's Answers are also quite good with the right rolls. But if the target is hard to hit, you probably want that tracking. One missed rocket will hurt your damage way more than a 10% damage offset. Okay, that was a lot of rocket talk, but I really do think they're awesome. They deal big immediate damage, and that is important because I keep saying Overload Chieftains could be a real pain in the ass with the absence of a good overload option. So you really want to deal with them in one stun. But onto some other good weapons to bring, let's go with an old classic, the Whisper of the Worm. This is the option you use for a long extended boss fight, where total damage matters more than DPS. This thing hits hard, but it also has a lot of ammo to give you if you are hitting your shots. Again, kind of a long shot, but you want to be prepared. And speaking of old classics, let's not forget about Sleeper Simulant. It isn't the powerhouse that it was last season, but could still be viable for certain encounters. And not necessarily just DPS. I used Sleeper on day 1 of Crown of Sorrows in the first encounter for those ogres that would spawn in, and it worked amazingly. One of my favorite weapons since it came into the game has been XENOPHAGE. This weapon has a ton of utility. It is good for taking out shields, dealing with groups of enemies, can spawn Warmind cells even though who uses those anymore, and if a boss is lacking a crit, this is one of the best options. This was the meta for day 1 Deepstone Crypt for the security encounter, and even after its nerf, a nerf which I think should be reverted by the way, it can still get a very easy one phase of the security encounter. Definitely have this one ready to go. The next weapon is a no-brainer in my opinion, but I think it is slept on these days, and that is Anarchy. Even though it got a very substantial nerf at the start of last season, it is still extremely good. I used it in a recent 1580 Lost sector, and it still puts in work. When you are under-leveled, being able to deal damage from behind cover is so valuable, and Witherhoard and this are really the only two weapons that can do that. It is not the juggernaut that it once was, but that's a good thing. And with scavenger mods, depending on the encounter, this could still be really good. We have Lucent Finisher on our artifact this season that allows you to spawn heavy ammo when finishing a champion or a Hive Lightbearer, so you can use this to keep your reserves up when running Anarchy, or any heavy really. The next one I will say is a good ad clearing sword. Swords are still an amazing option in my opinion, and something like the Hero of Ages with Chain Reaction, or even the old tried and true Falling Guillotine can still really shine, especially with Volatile Flow, so don't sleep on a good sword. I know we are under leveled so it is risky to use, but they have a ton of ammo, and with something like an Invis Hunter or Devour Warlock, these can still be very good. And let's not forget they are still one of the best options for the first boss of the Prophecy Dungeon, so if we get a boss fight similar to that, they still could be a good play. I will also mention Lament here, but it has some buggy stuff going on with it right now, so buyer beware. It is still good, but it has some weird damage detection stuff happening. So maybe have it leveled up anyways, but I'm not sure how good it will be. And that brings us to my final recommendation, the new burst DPS kit on the block, Parasite. This gun is a hell of a lot of fun. I did a review on this weapon the night it came out, before all the clips that you have seen, and I called that it would be the king for A-Tracks, and Glad and the gang proved me right. So if we have a really fast damage window, this weapon may shine. Obviously this throws 4th Horseman out the window, but hey, you never know. This weapon requires killing many adds beforehand, where 4th Horseman does not. On top of just insane initial one-shot damage though, this thing isn't just a boss slayer. The times 20 worm can clear out huge swarms of enemies and is great for deleting champions. Again, this weapon runs into ammo issues, but those can be worked around. This is definitely a gun you want to have ready for day 1. And that is it for my suggestions. I think I'm going to make an exotic armor variant of this video for the 3 classes. It likely won't be quite as long, but should still be very informative. So if you don't want to miss that, be sure to like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, then a like would be greatly appreciated. I cannot wait for the new raid, as day 1 raids are always so exciting. I am more excited for this one than I have ever been, as for the first time I have a full day 1 team. I hope you can all get to experience it too, as there really is nothing like it. If you made it this far, then I thank you so much for watching. Happy raid prepping, Guardians, and take care.